Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and today we're going to be chatting through the books that I read in the month of February. So if you've been on my channel for the past couple of months, I have been doing these videos called Recent Reads, in which I talk about the 4- and 5-star reads that I read in that month. But honestly, I'm getting a little tired of that video because that means I have to keep track of all the other books that I haven't talked about in my wrap up and then make another video talking about them at some point. So I had this whole video concept where I was going to do like a tier ranking of the 1, 2, and 3-star reads from the first half of the year and tier rank them based on if they were actually good or if they were really not something I would recommend. And I'm just starting to not love that concept because I'd really just like to have each month and talk about all the books, no matter the rating. So we're gonna backtrack a little bit and I'm gonna talk about the books that I read in January that I haven't talked about yet because I was gonna do that video, and also talk about my February books, all the books I read in February. So we're gonna start off with January 1st and then I'll move into the books I read in February. So starting off with January, the first book I have to talk about is Starling House. This was one of my most anticipated releases because Alexia Haro is maybe one of my favorite authors. I really love her writing style. She always has really interesting concepts for her books, so I was super excited for this one. Unfortunately, it was quite disappointing to me. I ended up giving it like a 3-star rating. It just felt very boring. It felt lacking the magic that her previous books have had, and it really just was not my favorite thing, unfortunately. So really sad to say I didn't love this one, but I'm hoping her next book will be more of a hit, but sadly, this one just wasn't for me. Next up is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is my first book by this author. I know he's written several other fantasy series that I'm kind of vaguely interested in, but this one definitely piqued my interest because it is a fantasy book about books set in a library. And I did like this one a decent amount. I think I would almost want to read the sequel to see if it gets better because this book was quite confusing to me and it just felt like it wasn't explaining anything. Like, it almost felt like Mark Lawrence knows all the answers to this series and he was just like writing plot without explaining what's going on, and it's like, wait, what? Could you go back? So it was good. I liked the setting, but it felt way too confusing for the story. So I liked it, but I really don't know if it's gonna be something that I stick with. So we'll just see. I might pick up the sequel. I might borrow it from the library to just save some money and see if it's worth continuing. I'm gonna talk about this whole series because I basically read them back to back. So the series that I'm talking about is the Vicious Lost Boys series. So the first book, The Never King, was a book club pick for my in-person book club, and I just had such a fun time with it. Like, it is not the greatest thing I've ever read. It is a dark romance, so definitely look into content warnings, but it just really hooked me. Like, I don't know, it was just easy to read. It just was like a popcorn read, and it was really what I was in the mood for at the time when I read this. So I immediately read book 2, and then I read book 3, and then I read book 4, like literally back to back to back, because each book ended on such a big cliffhanger that I really couldn't leave that. Like, I had to know what was gonna happen next. So this is basically a Peter Pan retelling, but it is very dark and very steamy. So we follow whatever her name is. I really can't remember. I think it's Darling, and she gets whisked away to Neverland because of a curse that has been placed on all the women in her family. So her grandmother went, her mother went, and now it is her turn. She is 18 and it is now time for her to go to Neverland, and it's part of this curse. And she goes there, she meets the Lost Boys and Peter Pan, and there's also some conflict that is going on in the story, obviously, that propels it along. It's real good. I am honestly really interested in the kind of standalone companion book that's going to be coming out eventually following Rock and Hook. that's gonna be great. I'm real excited about that. So definitely like not the best thing I've ever read, which is why I gave all the books 3 stars, but they were just so addicting I couldn't stop reading them. So definitely look into the content warnings. And I also want to say I don't even like Peter Pan as a story, and I really don't like retellings as I'm learning, but this was just addicting. It was a good time at the time, and it was super fun. Next up is a super short book that I read, and that is The Salt Grows Heavy. I bought this book fairly recently and then read it in January, and I liked it well enough, but I think what really made me not enjoy this book is the audiobook. It really didn't seem to work for me, and I do want to keep my copy and try reading it again physically, because there's just something about this book that I think needs to be read physically. Like, I don't think it works well as an audiobook because there were so many like little details that I think I missed. So definitely a book that I want to try again in the future. But from what I remember, it's like a horror romance. I remember there was cannibalism in there. Honestly, the details are really escaping me because I read it so quickly and it was so short. I think the audiobook is literally like 3 hours long. So I don't know. I don't really remember much about it, but it was fine. So we'll see if I get around to it eventually to try again. Next up is Tools of Engagement by Tessa Bailey. This is the 3rd and final book in her romance series that she's written, and this is definitely the worst book in the series for me. There is just something about this book that just came off as super cringy and was really not a fan. So I gave it 2 stars. Like, I really did not enjoy it very much. And I'm starting to think maybe Tessa Bailey really isn't one of my favorite romance authors. I don't know, I really didn't like this one. Like, this one really just irked me for some reason. So I'm gonna give her another chance. I do have her other series, the first book being Too Hot to Handle. So we'll see if that one can redeem Tessa Bailey for me. But maybe she's just not the romance author for me like I thought she was. Next up, I'm really disappointed to say I did not love Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Shauna McGuire. This is book 9, I believe, in the Wayward Children series. And I think what disappointed me the most about this book was how little dinosaurs there were. Like, do you see this dinosaur on the cover? I wanted to be there, but I feel like there was very little actual dinosaurs in this book, which was really disappointing. But it's also one of the books in this series that is set mainly at the school. So if you're unfamiliar with this series, the Wayward Children series is a novella series in which we follow several different characters, mainly like young adults who just don't feel like they belong in the world and have a door that appears to them that they can escape into like their ideal perfect world. And then Eleanor's School for Wayward Children is a place for these children to come back to and kind of get rehabilitated back into society. And there have been books in this series where we are set in those doors that the children go to, which is my favorite. Those are my favorite books in the series because I just want to be in those fantastical worlds. But then there's also books in the series that feel more fillery to me, which were set at Eleanor's School for Wayward Children, and it's more like day-to-day life and not so much going on like fantastical adventures and having like good morals be brought up and like stuff like that. It doesn't feel very fairy tale-esque to me in those books in the series. So this one unfortunately was one of the ones set at the school, and I just don't love those. So I give it 3 stars. Like, it's still good. I still love this series, but it definitely was the weakest so far for me. Next up is a book I'm very disappointed that I did not love, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism. I really wanted to love this. I really did, because Grady Hendrix has such good ideas for horror, but sometimes they really just don't pan out for me. So in this one, we're following our main character, and she has a best friend. They've been best friends for quite a long time, and so one day they are out in the woods with their group of friends, and her best friend gets kind of left behind. They can't find her. She stays out in the woods overnight, and then the next morning she stumbles back to where they were staying. She's just not acting right, and I just feel like this book was so obvious. It just felt so obvious to me that she was possessed. And it really bugged me how naive our main character was. Like, she thought of everything but being possessed, which I guess is probably people's, you know, not first thoughts when your best friend comes like stumbling out of the woods acting really weird. But I don't know, I just feel like if you've read horror books and you're kind of familiar with that, it was very plain and obvious, and it just really bothered me, and it just felt so drawn out. This book was way too long for what it was doing for me, so I think I gave it 2 stars. I also just really did not like the characters. Like, they were all quite unlikable to me, so personally was not a fan. Okay, so those are all the books that I read in January that I haven't talked about yet. So we are done doing the recent reads, 4 and 5 star reads videos, because I'm honestly just sick of doing them. I think I've only done 2, but I'm sick of separating the books. Like, I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. So I am done backtracking. Now we're back on track. So this is February's wrap up. So the first book that I finished in the month was Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I'm participating in Brandy Sandy Along that Steph is hosting in her Patreon, which is super fun. So this was our very first book. Elantris is very fine to me. I definitely can tell this is Brando Sando's first book. It very much feels like a debut book, but I liked it okay. So in this book we follow mainly 2 perspectives. So our first one is Raoden, if I'm remembering his name correctly, and he is the prince of the kingdom that we're in, and he, at the very beginning of the book, like literally like the first chapter, he gets an ailment that makes it to where he is exiled and is sent to the city called Elantris, which used to be this like big glorious city. It was just a big beautiful city several decades ago, but now it is overrun with people who are getting like this ailment of sorts that affects like their whole body, and I believe it's contagious. I really don't remember, okay? I read this book like right at the beginning of February, so it's been a while. So we're following him, and so now he's in Elantris and he's trying to learn how to live. He's basically like a zombie. That's how I kind of thought of them. And then our other main character is Serene, and she is destined to marry Prince Raoden, but when she gets to the kingdom, he's been sent to Elantris, so he's basically been deemed as dead. And so we're following her as she's navigating court politics and all of that. So this book was fine. I really don't like how Brando Sando writes romance, or at least in this book I really didn't like it. It felt very weird to me, and this book is very heavily religious, which I think is interesting, but it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's definitely not my favorite thing I've ever read, but I think it was interesting to go back after having read all of Mistborn and kind of seeing what his first book looks like, and it was fine. I don't think it's probably the best place to start with Brando Sando. If I hadn't already read Mistborn, I think I'd be really like not eager to read more by him if Elantris was my first book by him, but I've already read all of Mistborn, so I knew I liked this author already. So I don't think Elantris is really the best place to start in terms of enjoyability, because the book is really long for what it's doing, but it was fine. I think it's interesting to read in terms of Cosmere, like reading all of the Cosmere books, but definitely not the best place to start in my opinion. Next up is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. I read this as part of my in-person book club. This was our pick for February, and I gotta say, I was real disappointed by this book. So this is a YA like historical fiction book in which our main character, who I can't even remember her name, is living at home with her aunt as her parents are off in Egypt exploring, and she gets a letter that her parents have died in a tragic accident, and being the annoying main character that she is, she decides, you know what? I'm gonna travel by myself in like, you know, the 1800s or whatever. This book is set like a long time ago, and you know, just go do whatever I want, and that's what I'm gonna do. So she does that. She goes to Egypt, and she meets her uncle there, who's like, girl, what are you doing here? And so she is trying to figure out what happened to her parents, and honestly I'm kind of surprised she cared so much because her parents did not really care about her at all. And there's like such ridiculous plot twists in this book that I literally just like rolled my eyes. I'm like, really? This is what we're doing? Wow. So safe to say, did not like this book very much. And also there is a male love interest in this book who, oh my gosh, so annoying. Like he would just like lean against everything. Like, why are you leaning on everything, dude? Like, do you have poor balance or something? Like, you maybe need to get that checked out, because like, why are you leaning against everything? Literally. And there were pictures in this book, quite a jump scare when like you're reading the ebook and you're just bopping along and you turn the page and suddenly just like this full illustration of a man in your book, and it's like, oh hello. What you doing? So that was a jump scare. Yeah, I was not expecting that. So I think I gave this book like a 3-star, but it's honestly bordering more on like a 2.5. I really didn't enjoy it. Not many people in book club enjoyed it either, which makes me feel justified in my rating. So really wouldn't recommend this, to be honest. Like, I really was not a fan at all. Next up is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the second book in the Delilah Green series, and oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever related more to a character than in this book. So in this book we follow Astrid, who we know from Delilah Green. She is Delilah's stepsister, I believe, if I'm remembering the relation correctly. I don't know, I know their family some way. So we're following Astrid, and she really wants to design and build this house because she like works in like the like HGTV kind of area. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Construction, I guess, but not doing the construction, more of like the design and like selling of the house. But she really wants to do something different. Like, she's tired of being the one who's like, oh, you're a girl, so you do all the design and decor and prettiness instead of like the hardcore like work of building the house. She's really tired of that stereotype, and so in comes Jordan, who is a contractor, and they work together and they are being filmed for this TV show, flipping this house, and it was such a good time. Like, Astrid, wow. Like, I didn't love her in Delilah Green, but I loved her in this book. And I just, wow. I wasn't expecting to feel so like emotional reading a romance book, but Astrid Parker, wow. It was just great. It was just great. Like, there was just so many good moments in this book, and Ashley Herring Blake is definitely cementing herself as one of my favorite romance authors. She just writes such good, realistic characters that I just connect with so deeply, and I just love this book truly so much. I think I might want to bump my rating up to 5 stars for this one, honestly, because the more I think about this book and talk about this book, I literally can't stop thinking about it. And I read it like at least a couple weeks ago. It's just stuck on my brain. I just love it. So it's official. It's gonna be a 5-star read for me. Yeah, I loved it. It was really good. Y'all should definitely read this series. It is so good. Like, some of the best romance writing I've ever read. Alright, please don't come for me for this next one, because I know it's an unpopular opinion and I literally don't mean any disrespect to people who like this book. But next up is The Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah Janet. And yeah, I didn't love this, but before y'all come for me, I do want to say I really like Valaris. Okay, Valaris is a very cool place. I would definitely like to go there if it was real, because it seems like a cool place. But I don't know, the plot of this book felt a little too drawn out for me, which I think is my main problem. Like, the book itself was actually like pretty good. I think I liked it a fair amount. It definitely is an improvement over A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I just feel like the plot for what it did could have been shortened up in terms of page length. Felt a little long to me, but it was still pretty good. I think it might be like, I don't know, it might actually be a 4-star. I had originally given it 3 when I just finished it, but it is like equal to, if not better than, ACOTAR to me. But yeah, I won't talk about the specifics of this book because I don't want to spoil anybody, but it was pretty decent. I do want to continue the series because I want to see where it goes. And I did have a comment like a couple weeks ago saying that Akawar, A Court of Wings and Ruin, is even better than this one. So if that's true, that would be exciting. So I think this one's like a 3.5, bordering on a 4 for me, but it was okay. Not my favorite though. Next up, I finally read Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. This was so good. There was tears involved. There were so many emotions involved. I was a wreck reading this book. Like, wow. All I'm gonna say, because I don't obviously want to get into spoilers, Paragon. That's it. Paragon. That's all I gotta say. Just Paragon. So read Robin Hobb if you don't, because you should definitely do that. You're welcome. Next up, I feel like I have an unpopular opinion about this next book as well, because people don't seem to be liking this. And I'm sad because it's really good. And that's Feybound. I'm just obsessed with Feybound, and it's pure enjoyment, honestly. But what I've kind of seen and heard is that most people were not expecting the characters to be elven, which it does say, I believe, in the flap of the book, like the synopsis, that there is elves in this world as well, so it's not just fae, which I don't mind. Like, honestly, I don't really know what the difference is. I'm sure there's a difference. I'm not gonna bother looking it up, but I just loved this. Like, I loved this so much. I think the reason why I loved it so much is because it was such a refreshing read compared to Sarah J Maas's fae. Nothing against what she writes at all. Like, seriously, read what you will, write what you will, okay? But this was such a refreshing fae story for me because the characters in the fae were not like so hyper masculine or hyper feminine and weren't so sexual, I guess, which again, nothing wrong with that, but Feybound was just so special to me, and it just read so different from other Fae books that I've read in the absolute best way possible. So in this book, we follow our main character, Yiren, I believe, and she is a colonel in this elven army, and so elven and Fae are like, they're not meshing, you know, they're in war together, and we follow Yiren as she hears a prophecy from her sister and goes and acts upon that and ends up killing everybody in her fleet of soldiers. So because of this, she is banished from the elven community, I guess. That's not the word I want, but we're gonna go with that. So she's left out into the forest, and she stumbles upon these creatures called Obia, which I'm obsessed with. They are so cool. But she somehow, I won't get into the details, gets sucked up into the Fae world and is staying there, and her sister gets involved and things get very interesting. There's lots of plot twists and I absolutely love this world. Like, I think this is one of the most magical fantasy worlds I've read in a long time. I just felt so sucked in and like, man, I want to go there so bad. So I gave it 5 stars on pure enjoyment. Like, in reality, it's probably like a 4.5, but I just loved it so much that I'm giving it 5. Next up, I finished a series, look at me go, and that is Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, which is the 3rd and final book in the Delilah Green series. I like this one a fair bit. I didn't love it quite as much as books 1 and 2, but it was really interesting hearing from Iris because we've heard about her through all the other books. So it was really nice getting her perspective on things, and her romance was super cute. It was great. I don't really have anything particular that like is making me not love it as much, but did I give it 4? I think I gave it a 4. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. So like, it was definitely still really good and would definitely recommend, but wasn't my favorite compared to the others. Next up, this is a very random book that I decided to read, and that is The Drowned Woods by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is a standalone, but it's all set within the same world as the Bone Houses, I think it's called. So I really like, she writes mainly standalones that all correspond to each other in some way, which I think is super cool. So this book is inspired by Welsh mythology, which I thought was super cool, and we're following our main character, Mare, and she is the last living water diviner, and she is very sought after because of her power, and she gets swept along on this quest and things go awry. And honestly, the writing style of this book was just great. I just thought it was very compelling to read. It was just fun, fast-paced, loved the audiobook, and it was just a good time. It was just fun. I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, I'm not really remembering too much that happened, but I just remember having a good time while I was reading it, so 4 stars. All right, we're almost done, people. Just one more book, okay? So the last book I read in February is The Neighbor Favor by Christina Forrest. I read this book as part of a little secret vlog I'm doing, so I will save my thoughts for that vlog, but I do just want to give you the rating that I gave this book. I gave it 3 stars, but you'll hear all my thoughts that I had about this book in that vlog, which should be coming out at some point in March. So there you have it, friends. Those are all the books that I read in February and all the books I didn't talk about in January as well. So I hope y'all don't mind going back to just normal wrap-ups, because I don't know, I'm getting tired of keeping track of things when I could just do one video and be done. So let me know of anything that you've read in February that you just absolutely loved, or your thoughts on any of the books that I talked about today, and I will see you all in another video soon. Goodbye!